What up, though? Oxford English Dictionary. Pry. 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 To raise, move, or force up, out, open, with a lever. It's from 1806. Oxford English Dictionary. This is pry. Pry. This is the noun. An instrument for prizing something open. A lever, a crowbar, from 1803. Congressional Research Service, Child Welfare in the President's Fiscal Year 2023 Budget, April 26, 2022. Child Welfare in the President's Fiscal Year 2023 Budget. The President's Fiscal Year 2023 budget requires $12.9 billion for child welfare programs authorized in Title 4-B and Title 6-E of the Social Security Act, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and related programs, and the Victims of Child Abuse Act. Comparable funding provided for these same programs in fiscal year 2022 was $11.7 billion. The president's budget proposes to reauthorize through fiscal year 2027 the recently expired or expiring funding authorizations for child and family services programs. The administration calls for legislation that would amend PSSF program law to increase mandatory funding authorized for the program from $345 million per year to $645 million per year. The budget also calls for legislation to increase annual mandatory funding authority for the Chaffee foster care program for a successful transition to adulthood to $243 million compared to $143 million under current law. The president's budget requests continued discretionary funding for the adoption and legal guardianship incentive payments, which are payments to states that increase the rate at which children who would otherwise remain in foster care indefinitely are moved to permanent homes via adoption or legal guardianship. Under Title 4-E Foster Care Prevention and Permanency Program, states are entitled to federal support for a part of every eligible program cost. To incentivize state use of authority under Title 4-E to provide prevention services and kinship navigator programs, the president's fiscal year 2023 budget proposes to amend Title 6-E to increase the share of federal support provided for those services and programs. It also seeks legislation to increase the federal share of support for Title 4-E, eligible children in foster care who are placed with kin, as well as those who leave foster care for legal guardianship with kin. At the same time, it proposes to further reduce the federal share of assistance costs for children in foster care who are placed in non-family settings, including those placed in qualified residential treatment programs. At the same time, it proposes to further reduce the federal share of assistance costs for children in foster care who are placed in non-family settings, including those placed in qualified residential treatment programs. That sounds scary. That sounds scary. Finally, it proposes to amend the Title IV-E program to prohibit discrimination in provision of foster care and adoption-related services based on the religious beliefs, gender identity, gender expression, sex, or sexual orientation of children or adults being served. Finally, it proposes to amend the Title IV-E program to prohibit discrimination in provision of foster care and adoption-related services based on the religious beliefs, gender identity, gender expression, sex, sexual orientation of children or adults being served. Okay. The president's fiscal year 2023 budget proposes $12.9 billion for support of child welfare activities authorized in Title IV-B and Title VI-E of the Social Security Act, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and related programs, and the Victims of Child Abuse Act Theater. This amount includes legislative proposals seeking increased mandatory funding for fiscal year 2023 of $744 million above current law, and increased discretionary funding request of $218 million above final fiscal year 2022 funding. It's a lot of funding. I assume there are a lot of children without families who are in the foster care system. A lot of money, which could probably buy a lot of resources. Now, who those resources come from, how serious the people providing those resources or those services are, how compassionate they are, how nurturing, how caring they are, is another question. The budget proposals, including requests for certain program amendments and for additional discretionary and mandatory funding, are described as efforts to improve the ability of child welfare workers and the child welfare system to distinguish between poverty and neglect, prohibit discrimination in provision of foster care and adoption services based on a child or adult's religious beliefs, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we understand that. You want to help everyone equally. We hope. Child welfare funding, fiscal year 2022 provided, and fiscal year 2023 proposed amounts, dollars in millions. Child welfare research, training, and demonstration. Research, training, and demonstration, child welfare. Fiscal year 2022, it's $19 million. For fiscal year 2023, President's budget request, $121 million from $19 million for child welfare, research, training, and demonstration. From $19 million in 2022 to a requested $121 million for 2023. Foster care. I believe this is $5,920 million in 2022, and requested for 2023, it's 6,000,000,500,000. 6,000,000,500,000 for Title 4-E, Prevention Services Clearinghouse. Prevention Services Clearinghouse, 1 million in 2022 and 10 million requested for 2023. It says Prevention Services Clearinghouse. So this is to, I guess it says, I'm not sure what the exact definition is of Prevention Services Clearinghouse, but prevention services seems to speak to putting systems in place to where parents can better nurture and nourish their children, and also for people considering becoming parents, and also for women who are pregnant, or women and men who are pregnant and expecting a child. Services provided by them so that less children become orphans and need foster care. This is the lowest ask and distribution of said budget. Children's Justice Act grants. Children's Justice Act grants. 20 million in 2022 and 20 million in 2023 requested. Children's Advocacy Centers and related training and TA, 33 million in 2022, and the ask for 2023 is 40 million. Court appointed special advocates, 14 million in 2022, 14 million in 2023. Training for judicial personnel, 4 million in 2022. The request is 6 million for 2023. I ain't gonna do everything. I'm not gonna do everything. I'm gonna leave it up to you to do some of these things, to scrutinize some of these programs that the money is being distributed to. I have no doubt that all of these particular programs that the money is being distributed to are very interesting and are very telling about the foster care system. Sometimes you wish that everyone, when dealing with children and dealing with the care and nurturing and nourishing of children, everyone would have the utmost integrity and compassion. But we know this isn't the case. Let's shake it. 125 million for CAPTA state grants compared to 95 million provided for fiscal year 2022. This grant program supports grants to states to strengthen their CPS systems. I assume that's Chicago. It's not Chicago Public Schools. Strengthen their CPS systems. Let's go back up. CAPTA. What's the CAPTA? Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. So this is Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. 125 million for that. Yeah. Okay. Public Law 105-89, November 19th, 1997. 105th Congress. This act may be cited as the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997. The parental rights of the parent to a sibling have been terminated involuntarily if reasonable efforts of the type described in subparagraph B are not made with respect to a child as a result of determination made by a court of competent jurisdiction in accordance with subparagraph. Reasonable efforts to place a child for adoption or with a legal guardian may be made concurrently with reasonable efforts of the type described in subparagraph B. Definition of legal guardianship, Section 475 of such Act, 42 U.S.C. 675, is amended by adding at the end of the following. The term legal guardianship means a judicially created relationship between child and caretaker, which is intended to be permanent and self-sustaining, as evidenced by the transfer to the caretaker of the following parental rights with respect to the child. SEC 103 states required to initiate or join proceedings to terminate parental rights for certain children in foster care. A child shall be considered to have entered foster care on the earlier of the date that is 60 days after the date on which the child is removed from the home. Title II, Incentives for Providing Permanent Families for Children. SEC 201, Adoption Incentive Payments. SEC 473A, Adoption Incentive Payments. Grant authority. Subject to the availability of such amounts as may be provided in advance in appropriations acts for this purpose, the Secretary shall make a grant to each state that is an incentive eligible state for a fiscal year in an amount equal to the adoption incentive payment payable to the state under this section for the fiscal year, which shall be payable in the immediately succeeding fiscal year. Incentives for providing permanent families for children. Incentives for providing permanent families for children. We know that the incentive for providing a permanent family for a child is the actual family. Adoption incentive payment. In general, except as provided in paragraph 2, the adoption incentive payment payable to a state for a fiscal year under this section shall be equal to the sum of $4,000 multiplied by the amount, if any, by which the number of foster child adoptions in the state during the fiscal year exceeds the base number of foster child adoptions for the state for the fiscal year, and $2,000 multiplied by the amount, if any, by which the number of special needs adoptions in the state during the fiscal year exceeds the base number of special needs adoptions for the state for the fiscal year. 2-year availability of incentive payments. Payments to a state under this section in a fiscal year shall remain available for use by the state through the end of the succeeding fiscal year. Number 3, base number of foster child adoptions. Base number of foster child adoptions. The term base number of foster child adoptions for a state means, with respect to fiscal year 1998, the average number of foster child adoptions in the state in fiscal years 95, 96, and 97, and with respect to any subsequent fiscal year, the number of foster child adoptions in the state in the fiscal year for which the number is the greatest in the period that begins with fiscal year 1997 and ends with the fiscal year preceding each subsequent fiscal year. In general, for grants under subsection A, there are authorized to be appropriated to the Secretary $20 million for each of fiscal years 1999 through 2003. In general, the Secretary may, directly or through grants or contracts, provide technical assistance to assist states and local communities to reach their targets for increased numbers of adoptions and, to the extent that adoption is not possible, alternative permanent placements for children in foster care. E. Models to encourage the fast tracking of children who have not attained 1 year of age into pre adoptive placements. Models to encourage the fast tracking of children who have not attained 1 year of age into pre adoptive placements. Fast tracking of children who have not attained 1 year of age. Fast tracking of children who have not attained 1 year of age. What's the procedure? How do you fast track a child? How does that work? See, this is why I speak of compassion. But you also have to have a soul. Development of programs that place children into pre-adoptive families without waiting for termination of parental rights. Development of programs that place children into pre-adoptive families without waiting for termination of parental rights. This may sound good to someone who says that a child is in a bad situation, and we want to get that child into a loving, caring situation. But what happens when that's not the case? But the statute is still the statute. The law is still the law, right? That doesn't change. To carry out this subsection, they are authorized to be appropriated to the Secretary of Health and Human Services not to exceed $10 million for each of fiscal years 1998 through 2000. Adoption incentive payments. Whenever a bill or joint resolution making appropriations for fiscal year 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, and 3 is enacted that specifies an amount for adoption incentive payments pursuant to this part of the Department of Health and Human Services. Development of performance-based incentive system. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, in consultation with state and local public officials responsible for administering child welfare programs and child welfare advocates, shall study, develop, and recommend to Congress an incentive system to provide payments under Parts B and E of Title IV of the Social Security Act to any state based on the state's performance under such a system. Georgia General Assembly, Georgia General Assembly. From the legislative desk of Senator Nancy Schaefer, 50th District of Georgia, November 2007. The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services by Nancy Schaefer, Senator, 50th District. I have witnessed ruthless behavior from many caseworkers, social workers, investigators, lawyers, judges, therapists, and others such as those who pick up the children. I have been stunned by what I have seen and heard from victims all over the state of Georgia. In this report, I am focusing on the Georgia Department of Family and Children Services, DFCS. However, I believe Child Protective Services nationwide has become corrupt and that the entire system is broken almost beyond repair. The Department of Child Protective Services, known as the Department of Family and Child and Children Services in Georgia and other titles in other states, has become a protected empire built on taking children and separating families. This is not to say that there are not those children who do need to be removed from wretched situations and need protection. This report is concerned with the children and parents caught up in the legal kidnapping, ineffective policies, and DFCS who does not remove a child or children when a child is enduring torment and abuse. In one county in my district, I arranged a meeting for 37 families to speak freely and without fear. These poor parents and grandparents spoke of their painful, heart-wrenching encounters with DFCS. Their suffering was overwhelming. They wept and cried. Some did not know where their children were and had not seen them in years. I had witnessed the Gestapo at work, and I witnessed the deceitful conditions under which children were taken in the middle of the night out of hospitals, off of school buses, and out of homes. In one county, a private drug testing business was operating within DFCS department that required many, many drug tests from parents and individuals for profit. In another county, children were not removed when they were enduring the worst possible abuse. Having worked with probably 300 cases statewide, I am convinced there is no responsibility. I have come to the conclusion, literally, RIP. Poor parents oftentimes are targeted to lose their children because they do not have the wherewithal to hire lawyers and fight the system. All parents are capable of making mistakes, and that making a mistake does not mean your children are always to be removed from the home. That parenting classes, anger management classes, counseling referrals, therapy classes, and on are demanded of parents with no compassion by the system, even while they are at work and while their children are separated from them. This can take months or even years, and it emotionally devastates both children and parents. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children. Caseworkers and social workers are oftentimes guilty of fraud. They withhold evidence, they fabricate evidence, and they seek to terminate parental rights. When charges are made against them, the charges are ignored. The separation of families is growing as a business because local governments have grown accustomed to having taxpayer dollars to balance their ever-expanding budgets. Child Protective Services and juvenile court can always hide behind a confidentiality clause in order to protect their decisions and keep the funds flowing. There should be open records and court watches. Look who is being paid. There are state employees, lawyers, court investigators, court personnel, and judges. There are psychologists and psychiatrists, counselors, caseworkers, therapists, foster parents, adoptive parents, and on. All are looking to the children in the state custody to provide job security. Parents do not realize that social workers are the glue that holds the system together, that funds the court, the child's attorney, and the multiple other jobs, including DFCS's attorneys. The Adoption and Safe Families Act, set in motion by President Bill Clinton, your first black president, the one who puffed the L and didn't inhale, the one who blew the sax, right? You know, the illusion of soul. The Adoption and the Safe Families Act, set in motion by President Bill Clinton, offered cash bonuses to the states for every child they adopted out of foster care. In order to receive the adoption incentive bonuses, local child protective services needed more children. They must have merchandise that sell, and you must have plenty of them so the buyer can choose. Some counties are known to give a $4,000 bonus for each child adopted and an additional $2,000 for a special needs child. We just went over the act. I told you, it's theater. Shout out to Holbert. The act we just went over, it's theater. It said the same thing that she's saying here. Some counties are known to give a $4,000 bonus for each child adopted and an additional $2,000 for a special needs child. The incentive is not the family here. Employees work to keep the federal dollars flowing. The funding continues as long as the child is out of the home. When a child in foster care is placed with a new family, then adoption bonus funds are available. When a child is placed in a mental health facility and is on 16 drugs per day, like two children of a constituent of mine, more funds are involved. There are no financial resources and no real drive to unite a family and help keep them together. The incentive for social workers to return children to their parents quickly after taking them has disappeared, and who in protective services will step up to the plate and say, this much. The incentive for social workers to return children to their parents quickly after taking them has disappeared, and who in protective services will step up to the plate and say, this must end. I hope somebody step up to the plate. I hope a number of people step up to the plate. But one thing I notice is that not many parents actually love their children. And I mean, you can't expect a teacher at school to love your child. Although that's what they're tasked to do, educate / nurture / nourish your child. You want them to do everything. You want them to do everything but breastfeed them. They doing what you should be doing. So it looks bleak. It looks grim. When you put a person in a situation where this is their job, this is their 9 to 5, this is their paycheck to paycheck, and then there's incentives to place children with strangers. Yeah, this must end. Children have been violated and impregnated in foster care, and the head of a foster parents association in my district was recently arrested because of child violations. Some parents are even told if they want to see their children or grandchildren, they must divorce their spouse. Many who are underprivileged feeling they have no option, will divorce and then just continue to live together. This is an anti family policy, but parents will do anything to get their children home with them. Yeah. Some things are an act of war. What you think? You think some things worth going to war for? Yeah. It's a scary thing, but I know a few solid things that it seems like that warrant war, you know. Um don't go out and do nothing stupid, because just because you want to, just because people say fight, 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 just because people put a battery in your back, or maybe you put a battery in your own back. Maybe you was sipping and you tapped and now you want to get out. It's just not smart, because you ain't no help to nobody in the dirt. Gotta be smart. Gotta be smart. There are groups of people who been planning your demise for centuries. People know how to plan. So you should take a little time to make plans. Just rush into something and do something stupid. Fathers, non-custodial parents, I must add, are oftentimes treated as criminals without access to their own children and have child support payments strangling the very life out of them. The Foster Parents Bill of Rights does not bring out that a foster parent is there only to care for a child. Again, the Foster Parents Bill of Rights does not bring out that a foster parent is there only to care for a child until the child can be returned home. Many foster parents today use the Foster Parent Bill of Rights to hire a lawyer and seek to adopt the child from the real parents, who are desperately trying to get their child home and out of the system. I'm telling you, it's some disgusting people out here. I'm talking disgusting, wicked, disgusting people, man. It's hard to believe that a person could be so vile. Tax dollars are being used to keep this gigantic system afloat. Yet the victims, parents, grandparents, guardians, and especially the children are charged for the system services. The National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect in 1998 reported that 6 times as many children died in foster care than in the general public, and that once removed to official safety, these children are far more likely to suffer abuse, including violations, than in the general population. According to the California Little Hoover Commission report in 2003, 30% to 70% of children in California group homes do not belong there and should not have been removed from their homes. But that's one of the things that happens when the occupying force has the strongest military on the planet. And your family members, sometimes for generations, are members of that occupying military. So the family of the prisoner of war, so the family members of the prisoners of war are a part of the occupying military that's holding their family members as prisoners of war. On my desk are scores of cases of exhausted families and troubled children. No longer is judgment based on what the child needs or what the child wants to be with or what is really best or who the child wants to be with. No longer is judgment based on what the child needs or who the child wants to be with or what is really best for the whole family. It is some adult or bureaucrat who makes the decisions based often on just hearsay without ever consulting a family member or just what is convenient, profitable, or less troublesome for a director of DFCS. I am not sure if I even believe reform of the system is possible. Me either. Me neither, man. Not reform anyway, man. The system cannot be trusted. Now, well, when we're talking about the system is made up of individual humans. Those individual humans have names, which it really don't matter what their name is because, we're in the era of talk, 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 and more talk. On with the talking. It does not serve the people. It obliterates families and children simply because it has the power to do so. R.I.P. CDC, Child and Adolescent Immunization Schedule by age. Recommendations for ages 18 years or younger. United States, 2024. Immunization schedule, as well as the vaxes that you've gotten since you were a baby, and the ones that you take your babies to get. So this is birth to 15 months. Birth to 15 months. So what I'm going to do is, you can see this on the screen. We have the immunizing agents in the left column, which is the vaxes and immunizing agents in the left corner. It's all manner of them. And then on the right side, we have the age that you should be, that your child should be getting these, and how many doses. Okay. I'm not going to go over the agents because you can see that on the screen. You can read that for yourself. I'm just going to tell you how much you take your child to get poked. I got poked up, pause, with these immunizing agents. So, the first one at the top. At birth, 1 dose. 1 month, 1 dose. 2 months, and 4 months, 1 dose. 6 months, 1 dose. Six and a half months roughly to 15 months. 6.5 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 15 months, 1 dose. 8 months through 19 months. And the first one, it says 1 dose from birth to like 6.5 months. Okay, the next thing you need to get poked for. At birth, 1 dose. 1 month, your second dose. Between 1 month and 2 months, your second dose. At 5 months, your third dose. Now let's go on to the next one. At 2 months, 1 dose. At 4 months, the second dose. The next one, 2 months, first dose. 4 months, second poke. Next one, 2 months, 1 poke. 4 months, second poke. About 9 months, third or fourth poke. Then the next one, let's keep going down. Well, you listen, we don't even have to keep going down. I don't have to keep reading them. You see what's happening here. There's never a time when you're not getting poked. Okay? And then we have 18 months to 18 years. Same thing. There's a schedule for you to get poked. You take your child to get poked and you say you love them, you love them. This is what you do to someone you love. I know if you want to take them to school, you got to do this stuff because you need to take them to school because you got to go to work, right? So you got to take them to school. And these are all things you think about after you get up instead of before you lay down. You might say, how you going to tell me about what I need to do about my child? I'm not telling you anything. I'm just saying that coming from my perspective, I don't understand how anyone could say they love their child. If you take them to get poked like this is crazy. And guess what? It happened to me. And guess what? Guess what? You wonder why it's things out here like cancer, all manner of diseases. All these things come from this. All these things come from the chemicals that you consume. Let's shake it. Recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and approved by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Family Physicians, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, American College of Nurse Midwives, American Academy of Physician Associates, and National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners. Man, wow. I think I might call this show Meet Your Enemies. So here we go. The war on drugs or war on drugs. Just say no. This is Nancy Reagan. The CIA Contra crack cocaine controversy, a review of the Justice Department's investigations and prosecutions. And just so you know, the first time I heard crack was on TV. And that's the first time I heard it. The first time I saw it was on something written. We always just called them rocks. This is from oig.justice.gov. The news media picked up on the Mercury News series insinuation and made it explicit in coverage of the series. On August 20th, 1996, the headline of the first article to cover the Mercury News series, published by the Associated Press, stated, "Newspaper alleges that CIA helped spark crack cocaine plague." Excuse me. It was followed by other articles and editorials declaring that the crack cocaine crisis had been created by the CIA and or agents of the United States government. CIA's war against America. Palm Beach Post, September 14, 1996. The U.S. government was the first big crack pusher. Boston Globe, September 11th, 1996. Thanks to the U.S. government, Oscar Blanton Reyes is free and prosperous today. One man is behind LA tide of crack. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, September 16th, 1996. While the series does not allege that there was a deliberate plan to target black communities by the CIA or other agency of the United States government, mentioned in the article strongly implies such a plot. This is from PBS News. 50-year war on drugs imprisoned millions of black Americans, millions of indigenous Americans. You know some, and I know some. You probably was locked up, maybe, for a little while. 50 years ago this summer, President Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs, a war on inanimate objects, a war on something that won't fight back, a war on something you choose to consume. A key weapon was the imposition of mandatory minimums in prison sentencing. Decades later, those harsh federal and state penalties led to an increase in the prison industrial complex that saw millions of people, primarily of color, locked up. Between 1975 and 2019, the U.S. prison population jumped from 240,593 to 1.43 million Americans. Among them, about 1 in 5 people were incarcerated with a drug offense, listed as their most serious crime. While every grocery store and drugstore, some open 24 hours a day, gas stations, and all manner of stores sell drugs every single day, even on Sunday. The racial disparities reveal the war's uneven toll. Following the passage of stiffer penalties for crack cocaine and other drugs, the black incarceration rate in America, or the indigenous American incarceration rate in America, exploded from about 600 per 100,000 people in 1970 to 1808 in 2000. In the same time span, the rate for the Latino population grew from 208 per 100,000 people to 615, while the white incarceration rate grew from 103 per 100,000 people to 242. Experts say Nixon's successors, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, leveraged drug war policies in the following decades to their own political advantage, cementing the drug war's legacy. Most of these officials that take that particular office of the president and vice president and so on and so forth, most of these people leverage whatever the popular sentiment is for their own political advantage or their own attempt at controlling your thoughts for a spell. The explosion of the U.S. incarceration rate, the expansion of public and private prison systems, and the militarization of local police forces are all outgrowths of the drug war. Federal policies such as mandatory minimum sentencing for drug offenses were mirrored in state legislators. Lawmakers also adopted felony disenfranchisement while also imposing employment and other social barriers for people caught in drug sweeps. The domestic anti-drug policies were widely accepted, mostly because the use of illicit drugs, including rocks, in the late 1980s was accompanied by an alarming spike in homicides and other violent crimes nationwide. Those policies had the backing of black clergy and the Congressional Black Caucus. Those policies had the backing of black clergy and the Congressional Black Caucus. And we know the word black basically means fugazi. So what are we dealing with? The Congressional non-existent caucus, the Congressional illusory caucus, the illusion clergy, right? The law passed and signed by Reagan that October. Reagan, whose wife was Nancy Reagan, who we saw on the poster at the beginning that said, "Say no to drugs, just say no." The law passed and signed by Reagan that October imposed mandatory federal sentences of 20 years to life in prison for violating drug laws. The law also made possession and sale of rocks harsher than that of powder. Okay. Oxford English Dictionary. Prey. Prey. This is the noun. Prey. An animal that is hunted or killed by a carnivore for food. The kinds of animal collectively that are hunted by a carnivore and forms its diet. Something which is procured as or serves for food, provisions or rations. A person who is pursued or controlled by another. A person who is easily deceived or harmed. A victim of something harmful or undesirable. A person who is vulnerable to distressing thoughts or emotions. A person who is vulnerable to distressing thoughts or emotions. Something taken in war or by pillage, plunder. Something saved or recovered from a contest or trial, a reward for righteousness. We're talking prey here, Prey. The noun, a company or troop of soldiers, an army. Oxford English Dictionary, the online version, the subscription version. Prey, Prey. This is the verb. This is prey used as a verb or defined as a verb. To plunder, to commit pillage. To plunder, pillage, or rob. To take or capture by force, to seize. To take advantage of, to exploit, to make the victim of a particular crime, swindle, to exert a harmful or destructive influence over, to wear down, gradually, eat away at. To exert a harmful or destructive influence over, to wear down, gradually, eat away at. Think about that next time somebody tell you to stay prayed up. Do the right thing.